robot operating in places like shopping malls, airports, and restaurants. So therefore, it is increasingly important for a mobile robot to be able to interact socially and safely with its surrounding pedestrians. So imagine being on a busy street scenes as shown in these two images. We as humans don't typically track the movement of every single pedestrian, but rather we would group pedestrians with similar motions together and just track the motion of the group. For example, we can define a group for this group of 4 pedestrians over here, or another group for this group of 4 pedestrians over here. Sometimes some form of social ties exist inside the group. For example, this group might be a family group or a friend group. Therefore, it is inappropriate for a robot to intrude these kind of social groups. But what's more importantly, it would be very dangerous for a robot to perform some actions like this to cut through the group. By doing so, the robot might have the risk of cutting off the group and bumping into the pedestrians. And we think this is this behavior is unsafe, and we do not want that to happen. Can you guys still hear me? Just a check. Okay.
Yes, it works.
Okay, so in a typical robot navigation framework, where the robot treats each pedestrian individually, sometimes the robot will go for a gap that is simply there, and we think this will increase the robot's risk of bumping into the pedestrians. So in our paper, we propose to group pedestrians with similar motion characteristics together and apply some form of geometric enclosure around them. And by doing this way, the robot will be able to navigate in a safer manner. So how do we generate this kind of group space representation? Well, given a scene with a set of pedestrians, we first apply some form of clustering-based method to obtain a group membership for each pedestrian. Then for each pedestrian, we apply a personal space model. This personal space model is essentially an action model that represents a pedestrian's proxemics. And then lastly, we apply convex halls on the personal space of the pedestrians who belong to the same group. These convex halls are our group space representation. So the next question for our robot is, how would the robot obtain future states of these groups in order to integrate into its planner? For that, we are converting this problem into for now, a video prediction problem. So as the input, we will have an image sequence that essentially represents the evolution of a particular social group over a history of time. And what the model will do is then it will output another image sequence that will contain information such as the robot's future locations and the future geometry. So to do this, we are just using a very simple encoder-decoder network that largely leverages 3D convolutions to get the job done. So now moving away from our social groups, the group-based representation, we implemented a model predictive control for our robot. So at each time, the robot will propose a set of control rollouts, and then each control rollout is then evaluated over a cost function. This cost function mainly consists of 2 terms. The first term is related to the distance between the robot's control rollout and the robot's goal. And the second term is related to the distance between the robot's control rollout to the closest group boundary. And at each point, the robot will simply pick the control rollout that has the lowest cost to make its next move. And now I'm going to move on to talk about our experiments. So we largely conducted experiments in simulation by largely leveraging 2 popular pedestrian data sets, the ETH and the UCY data sets. And together they contain 5 environments as shown in this figure here. So for each environment, we define a cross and a flow task for the robot. Where in the cross task, the robot has to cross this major pedestrian flow. Whereas in the flow task, the robot has to go with or against the major pedestrian flow. So the pedestrian flow can be somehow indicated by these blue trajectories, where the trajectories are the trajectories of all the pedestrians in a data set. So additionally, we generate test cases by saying that at any given moment, when there are more than 5 pedestrians in a test region, as indicated by these black squares, we construct a test trial around that. And this table shows the total number of test trials we have. So for each pedestrian or agent in our simulation, we additionally implemented a non-reactive and a reactive agent mode. In the non-reactive agent case, every pedestrian will simply follow a playback of the trajectories in the data sets. This means that the robot will be invisible to the pedestrians. And we think this case will be applicable in scenarios where the robot has a very small profile that is very hard to be noticed by the pedestrians. On the other hand, we have the reactive agents, where the pedestrians' start and end locations are still preserved as they are in the data sets, but how they proceed towards the goal is powered by another navigation model called ORCA. So moving on to our approaches, all the approaches are integrated into the same NPC framework, and we are largely using pedestrian-based representation models as our baselines. So the three variants are pad no pad, where no future state predictions are considered. And we have pad linear, where the future locations of the pedestrians are predicted using constant velocities. And we have pad S-scan, where the future states of the pedestrians are predicted using a relatively popular trajectory prediction model, the social GAN. And for our models, we similarly implemented a version where we do not consider any future state predictions. So moving on, in the interest of time, we'll only be presenting the highlights of our results. So for the full result, please come to our poster during the poster session. So firstly, we would like to see, without any future state predictions, how would our model perform? And the metric we'll be considering for the sake of time is just the safety. And to measure safety, we're using a metric called the minimum distance to pedestrians. So this metric essentially means the distance, measures the distance when the robot has gone closest to any pedestrian throughout the duration of an entire trail. We can see that our model, as colored in the light blue, outperforms the baselines in all the scenarios. And we additionally perform the statistical significance analysis using the mathematical U-test. And we see statistical significance in all the comparisons in all the things. So similarly, now that with future state predictions considered, how would our model do compared to the baselines? And again, we're happy to see that our model, as indicated by the dark blue color, still outperforms the baselines with statistical significant results in most of these scenarios. So this is all great, but how would our model do in a more realistic setting? Due to certain limitations, we implemented a simulated laser scan scene for our model to be evaluated on. So for the simulated laser scans, we simply treat each pedestrian as a circle, and we have all these rays coming out from the robot. So when a ray hits the pedestrian circle, we can then collect a simulated laser scan point. We additionally just inject noise into these scan points and just generate group space representations directly from the simulated laser scan points. As you can see from this example here, the pedestrian on the lower right is completely occluded from the robot's view. So how would our model do in this setting then? We are happy to see that we're not seeing a big performance differences when our model is evaluated in the simulated laser scan settings. And we only see one statistically significant difference in just like one of the scenarios across all of them. So this is all good. As a recap of the results, we're able to show that with group-based representations, the robot in simulation appears to have a safer navigation behavior than with just pedestrian-based representation models. And we're also happy to see that our model performs reasonably well with the simulated laser scans. So next, I will show some kind of qualitative results. So the video in the middle is our model, and the video on the left is the baseline pedestrian-based model with the social GAN as the future state prediction model. And the video to the right is our model in the simulated laser scan settings. We can see that our model typically behaves conservatively and polite and try to respect this inter-pedestrian space as much as possible. Whereas for our baselines, the robot tends to go for the tiniest gaps that is there simply just to take advantage of it to reach its goal. And in a simulated laser scan settings, our robot behaves somewhat similarly as in the perfect perception setting. So just as a recap, in summary, we are able to show that in an NPC setting, leveraging group-based representations, does benefit the robot in terms of safety. And we think safety can be a close proxy for social compliance because the robots in general are being a bit further away from the pedestrians. And also, we are happy to see not much performance drop with the simulated laser scans. And our future work will mostly focus on just the real-world applicability of our model, with heavy emphasis on better model predictive controls, better prediction models for predicting future group states, and simpler geometry for faster computation. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Allan. That worked out greatly. So do we have questions? Maybe I ask the first question then if there's, well, there was one. Great, go ahead.
Thanks. What's the relative importance of using the convex hull versus using video prediction? So one thing you could do is predict individual motions using that SGAN and then apply the convex hull. Would that be enough?
Oh, I think the voice gets cut off in the middle.
Okay, I can repeat. So my question is, one other thing you could try is predicting individual people's motions and then applying the convex hull to these future predicted states. And I wonder how that compares to the sort of autoencoder video prediction you did.
Oh, this is a very good question. So we actually performed experiments about that. We used your method. We first predict the future state of the pedestrians using social gain and then apply the convex hull. So so we actually see just very similar results as our model. There's like not much difference. We didn't put it in the paper because I don't know, it feels like a more ad hoc method than our method, I would say, because you have all these predictions, then you apply the group. Because actually, sorry, I got a bit lost there. So there's actually some other key questions that also needs to be addressed with your approach too, that we feel will also will make this method feel a bit more ad hoc. One thing to consider is how do you maintain the membership of the groups throughout the duration? Because after you did this future prediction with the social GANs, like sometimes the group memberships like they kind of change around a lot. And this will result in some kind of unstable grouping behavior where sometimes you have groups, like say for a set of 4 pedestrians, sometimes they are part of the group and then they are not part of the group again, and then they become part of the group again. This will happen like quite oftenly with that. So so if that answers your question, does that answer your question? It's just we don't feel like this is a good way to put this.
Good, great. Do we have one more question? So maybe quickly, so do you think it would help if you would have some kind of information about whether people really belong to a group, so like considering longer histories of how they move together, or do you think that that could be used in the future, or do you already use
Yes, longer history will definitely help with the prediction. But I would say the main limitation of that is the data sets. So far, we don't have too many data sets that are large enough. Especially like one requirement we have for the data set is the ground truth metric labels of them. So with the data sets we have, as you might know, like groups is not something that's a very common occurrence in these data sets. Like it only happens when some people kind of work together, right? So the longer history we consider, the fewer data we'll have available for training, and the data will, like the number of data we have will drastically reduce with respect to the length of the history. So if we have a larger data set, we'll be able to do something like that, and I think that definitely will help with the prediction.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So let's thank Allan again.
Thank you.